pilot said they were almost there. Julianne Coep was 17 years old, sitting next to her mother on a small commercial plane somewhere over the Peruvian Amazon. Christmas Eve 1971, watching lightning crack across the sky outside her window like the storm was trying to tell them something they weren't listening to. The turbulence had been building for 20 minutes. Small at first, the kind that makes your stomach drop once and then settles. Then worse. Then the kind that makes people grab armrests and go quiet mid-sentence and stare straight ahead at nothing because looking at the person next to you means admitting how scared you actually are. Her mother squeezed her hand. Then the lightning hit the wing. The explosion wasn't loud the way movie explosions are loud. It was physical. A force that moved through the seat and up through Julianne's spine before her brain had finished processing what her eyes had just seen. The wing was gone. The plane was coming apart in midair, scattering pieces of itself and the people inside it across 10,000 feet of Peruvian sky. Julianne was still strapped to her seat when she went through the fuselage wall and into open air. She fell 2 miles, straight down into the Amazon jungle canopy below. Alone, without equipment, without her glasses, without one of her shoes, and without any way of knowing that of the 92 people on that plane, she was the only one the jungle was going to give back. What she did over the 11 days that followed, injured, alone, hunted by everything the Amazon could throw at her, is the kind of story that makes you sit very still and ask yourself one question. Could you have done that? Stay until the end. Because the moment she almost didn't make it, the moment the jungle came within seconds of keeping her forever, that part will hit you harder than anything else. Julianne Coep grew up knowing things most teenagers never learn. Her parents were German scientists, her father an ornithologist, her mother a naturalist, who had devoted their careers to studying the Peruvian Amazon. They had built a research station called Panguana deep in the rainforest, and Julianne had spent enough of her childhood there to understand the jungle the way most kids understand their own backyard. She knew which plants were safe and which weren't. She knew how to move through dense vegetation without burning herself out. She knew, from something her father had told her once without making a big deal of it, that in the Amazon, water is your compass. Find a stream. Follow it downstream. Small water leads to bigger water. Bigger water leads to people. She was 17 in December of 1971, just graduated from high school, and she and her mother were flying from Lima to Pucallpa to spend Christmas with her father at Panguana. Lanza Flight 508 was a routine domestic route, a Lockheed Electra turboprop, nearly full, the kind of unremarkable holiday flight that happens thousands of times every day around the world and lands without incident. Except this one didn't. The storm system sitting over the mountains east of Lima that afternoon was bigger and more violent than it looked from the ground. The cumulonimbus cells embedded inside it, the kind of towering internal storm columns that can generate winds powerful enough to tear aircraft apart, were invisible from the outside until the plane was already inside them. The turbulence that began about 25 minutes after takeoff was not the manageable kind. It was the kind that makes a plane feel like a toy in the hands of something that has decided it's done being patient. Around her, passengers were praying. Some were crying. Her mother held her hand and said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. Then the lightning found the right fuel tank. The wing went first. Then the structural integrity of everything connected to it. The fuselage began breaking apart at altitude, not in one clean explosion but in pieces, sections separating. The pressurized interior suddenly opened to 10,000 feet of Peruvian sky and the violent cold of altitude and the noise of wind that has no business being that close to human ears. Julianne went out still buckled to her seat. What happened next has been studied and discussed by aviation and survival experts for decades, and the conclusion they keep arriving at is the same one the physics suggests but the mind resists. She should not have survived the fall. The Amazon canopy is dense enough and layered enough that in certain conditions it can function like a series of impact-absorbing nets, each layer of vegetation slowing a falling object incrementally before the next layer catches it. The seat structure absorbed the final impact when she hit the ground. She was unconscious before she landed. She stayed that way through the night. When she opened her eyes the next morning, the jungle was already fully alive around her. Insects, birds, the drip of moisture falling from the canopy somewhere far above. The sounds of a world that had zero awareness of and zero interest in the fact that a 17-year-old girl had just fallen out of the sky into the middle of it. She called for her mother. She called until the calling became something she couldn't keep doing. Not because she stopped hoping, but because the jungle was not going to answer her, and she understood that on some level before she was ready to fully understand it. She took inventory of what she had. A broken collarbone, deep lacerations on her arms and legs, one shoe, no glasses. The world beyond a few feet was a blur of green and shadow. The thin dress she had boarded the plane in. No food, no water, no equipment of any kind. She had the things her father had given her without meaning to give them as survival training. She found a small stream on the first day and turned downstream without hesitating. The decision was not dramatic. It was simply the only logical move available, and she made it the way her parents had taught her to make decisions in the field, without wasting energy on the emotional weight of the situation when the situation required action instead. Moving through primary Amazon rainforest is genuinely brutal in ways that are hard to communicate to someone who hasn't done it. The ground is never flat and never dry. Roots cross every surface. The vegetation is layered and resistant, and pushing through it for hours costs more energy than the same distance walked on open ground would cost in a day. The humidity is so complete that breathing itself feels like an act of effort. And the insects in the Amazon, insects are not background noise. They are a constant, aggressive, total presence against every exposed surface of skin. Julianne's wounds were what scared her most. The lacerations from the crash were deep enough that by the second day flies had found them. By the third day, the wounds were infested with maggots. She removed them herself one by one using a small stick, a process that required the kind of focused, methodical calm that exists on the far side of panic, in the place where a person has accepted that what needs to be done simply needs to be done regardless of how it feels. She worked through the pain because the infection would kill her faster than anything else the jungle was preparing to throw at her. She found sections of the crash site scattered through the trees, seat cushions, pieces of fuselage, personal belongings distributed across a wide area by the impact and the canopy. She found Christmas cake in the wreckage. Dense, calorie-heavy fruitcake that someone had been carrying as a holiday gift. She rationed it across days, eating small amounts and saving the rest, understanding that her body needed fuel to keep moving and that stopping to search for more food cost more energy than the food itself would return. She found 3 passengers still strapped to their seats on the jungle floor. Fallen through the canopy the same way she had, not survived the landing the way she had. She checked each one. She kept moving. Processing that and continuing forward required something she has never fully described publicly, because some things that happen in extreme survival situations belong to the person who lived them and no one else. The nights were the hardest part. The Amazon at night is a completely different environment from the Amazon in daylight. The sounds change entirely. The daytime world replaced by nocturnal creatures. The darkness under the canopy so absolute that movement becomes impossible without risking a fall or a collision with something that would rather not be surprised. She slept on the ground, using whatever she could find as cover, listening to the jungle move around her in the dark and doing the thing that survival in isolation always eventually comes down to: getting through this hour so that the next one becomes possible. On the 4th day, she heard a plane somewhere above the canopy and screamed toward it until her voice was gone. The canopy swallowed her voice the way it swallows everything, completely, without echo, without acknowledgement. The plane continued on its route and the sound faded, and she kept walking downstream. The stream had grown into a proper river by then, wide enough that she could see open sky above it, which after days under the canopy felt like something close to relief. She built a rough raft from debris when the current was strong enough to use, floating sections of the river to save her feet and legs, which were in serious condition from the continuous exposure to wet ground and the infected wounds she was still managing with a stick and whatever small reserves of pain tolerance she had left. She caught small fish. She found fruit she recognized as safe from her years at Panguana. None of it was enough. All of it together was enough to keep moving, which was the only thing that mattered. On the 10th day, the river widened into something different, a section with a rough dock on the bank, a dugout canoe tied to it, and behind the dock a small shelter, empty but recently used, cut wood stacked against the wall, a path leading into the trees. She went inside and sat down and waited. The lumber workers who found her came back to their camp that evening, a small team working a section of forest several days from the nearest village. When they walked in and found a teenage girl alone in their shelter, barely able to stand, wounds infected, one shoe, dress torn and stained from 11 days of Amazon jungle. They did not ask complicated questions. They cleaned her wounds using gasoline, a local method for clearing maggot infections that is exactly as painful as it sounds and exactly as effective. They fed her. They made her sleep. The next morning, they took her by canoe to Turnavista, the nearest settlement with an airstrip. From there, she was flown to a hospital in Pucallpa. 11 days, 91 people dead, 1 survivor. Her mother's body was recovered weeks later, not far from where the main section of the plane had come down. Maria Coep had survived the initial crash but had died from her injuries before help could reach her. She had been out there in the same jungle during the same 11 days. Julianne has lived with that knowledge for over 50 years, the version of events where they were close and the jungle took one of them and returned the other, and no explanation exists for why. There is no clean resolution to that. There never will be. Julianne Coep went back to the Amazon. Not despite what happened there. Because of it, or maybe in spite of it, or maybe because for someone who grew up with her hands in that soil and her father's voice explaining which birds were singing and why, the jungle was never just the place that almost killed her. It was also the place that raised her. She became a mammalogist. She returned to Panguana. She has spent her career working to protect the same forest that swallowed her for 11 days and then, for reasons physics can partially explain and nothing else can, gave her back. She was 17 years old when the lightning hit the wing. She had no gear, no map, no rescue beacon. No help from anyone for 11 days except the quiet knowledge a scientist father had passed to his daughter around a research station dinner table without knowing he was saving her life. Follow the water downstream. That was it. That was the whole thing. And somehow, against every odd the Amazon placed in front of her, one after another across 11 brutal days, it was enough.